2 hours ago, Kyle arrived at the bar.
Hey, what's everyone drinking?
30 minutes ago, Kyle got his friends another round of drinks.
Cheers!
5 minutes ago, Kyle decided to drive home drunk. A minute ago, a law enforcement officer pulled up behind Kyle.
Sir, have you been drinking tonight?
A chain of events that began 2 hours ago is about to change Kyle's whole world. Drive sober or get pulled over. Paid for by NHTSA.
Did you know Microsoft has officially ended support for Windows 10? Upgrade to Windows 11 with an LG Gram laptop. Voted PC Mag's Reader's Choice Top Laptop Brand for 2025. Thin and ultra lightweight, the LG Gram keeps you productive anywhere. And Windows 11 gives you access to free security updates and ongoing feature upgrades. Visit lgusa.com/iHeart for great seasonal savings on LG Gram laptops with Windows 11. PC Mag Reader's Choice used with permission. All rights reserved.
Happy holidays! Want to give your host a gift? Consider subscribing, rating, and reviewing the show this holiday season. It really helps the show grow. From all of us at Believe, have a Merry Christmas, everyone, and a Happy Holiday.
Hello, and welcome to Around the Political World with John Rothman. I am your host, John Rothman. If you're a fan of the show, make sure to hit the follow button on the top right of Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening at this very moment. When you hit follow, leave a review or share an episode with a friend. It helps other people discover the show, keeps us going. So I like to point out each and every day, it expands our base. Well, 2025 is just about wrapped up. Just a few hours to go until 2026, a whole new year, a clean slate. I always remember when I was a kid, staying up till midnight and watching the old man leave the scene and the cry of a new baby, because, in fact, a new year requires a clean look, a brand new evaluation of where we are. I want to ask a question that is typical now in American politics, made famous by Ronald Reagan. Are you better off today than you were 1 year ago? Well, let's do a quick survey. Let's take a look at the world and let's ask the question, the critical question. Are we better off or not? In international affairs, we know that Ukraine continues to be a disaster and that there seems to be no immediate end to that conflict. For Europe as a whole, Donald Trump's decision to downgrade the European alliances represents a major shift in American foreign policy and perhaps in the world. The president's decision to cut AID, that major program which helped so many people around the world, also will have an impact. And what about the United Nations? Well, more marginalized than ever. It does not seem to be able to be a real player on the world scene. And that, of course, was not the intention of the founders. When the UN was founded in 1945 in San Francisco, the idea was to create a more stable world. Question I would ask you is, are we in a more stable world? And of course, the answer is no. We have many questions to confront domestically, and I want to talk for a few minutes about the things I will be looking for as 2025 ends and 2026 begins. The first thing I will be looking at is the question of the power of the American presidency. We have talked about that, frankly, almost every day. But there are decisions which are going to be made in 2026 which will have a huge impact on that power. First of all, the United States Supreme Court. They will determine whether or not the tariffs that the president imposed are legal. Secondly, the United States Supreme Court will deal with the power of the presidency in general. Should the president be able to rule by fiat or by executive order? That is one of the serious questions that we will face in terms of American democracy. This coming year, 2026, will require us to go to the polls again. It will be a national referendum. What direction should this country proceed to in the coming year? Will the Democrats take control of Congress? And if they do take control of Congress, what are the implications for the administration? One thing's for sure, the Democrats are going to push forward with their position that many of the decisions made by Donald Trump ought to be investigated, and they are determined to assume that position. Will that affect the nature of this election? You bet. The decision in the White House is to put Donald Trump out front to campaign for a Republican Congress. If that campaign is successful, Donald Trump will have 2 more years in his administration with a Republican Congress. If it fails, well, all bets are off. The Democrats, most assuredly, are going to mount a campaign which makes Donald Trump a central question on the ballot. And what about health? You know, I never thought that I would have to discuss with you the question of the nation's health. But are you following the measles outbreak? Now, I was under the impression in the year 2000 that measles were over in the United States, that we had conquered that serious illness. But it turns out, under the administration of Donald Trump and Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the measles are back. And the whole question of vaccination. Are vaccinations a good thing or a bad thing? The fact is that Health and Human Services has been cleaned out of many responsible scientists. And now, well, I happen to think the quacks are in control. The question becomes, what will we do as a nation to restore our nation's health? The death of Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s cousin, Tatiana, raises serious questions about his capability. Remember that her crusade, prior to her becoming ill and dying just the other day, was to refute the policies of her cousin, Robert Kennedy Jr. This question of the nation's health is growing, particularly with the anti-vaccine tendency, which we are now seeing manifest in the Department of Health and Human Services. There is more. The question of states and their rights, and what conflicts we now have with the Trump administration. Let me point out that the VA has just issued a directive essentially doing away with the right of a woman to have an abortion if it's done through the Veterans Administration. This is contrary to exactly what we thought was going to happen. Oh yes, I thought it would be even worse. But in fact, the simple truth is the Trump administration and the Republicans, who have for years advocated more limited government, are now forcing the government to take positions that are antithetical to the health and welfare of this nation. And let me point out another factor. Social Security is under siege. There are Republicans who still believe that Social Security should be made voluntary, that we, the people, would be better off controlling our own Social Security money. They say, those Republicans, give it back to the people who put the money in. Let them handle their own affairs. Let me be clear. I learned this lesson graphically in 2005 when George W. Bush, assuming powers for the second time as president, decided to urge the nation to go with voluntary Social Security. Many of us opposed that with great vigor. And the simple truth is that in 2008, we saw what would have happened if, in fact, this country had turned Social Security money back to the people and they'd been able to invest it. We saw that crash, and we learned a valuable lesson. The point of Social Security was to create a system which would protect people. Yes, even protect them from themselves. Now, that may be antithetical to conservative thinking, but it is a practical reality. Let me point out that if you go to the Social Security Administration today for help, for answering of questions, well, you're going to have a very tough time because they've laid off thousands of employees, and the efficiency of the Social Security system, well, it's not there, at least not as it once was. That is something we are going to have to work on. And if the Democrats take control, something they will have to move immediately to protect and defend. There is more, of course. The cutbacks with the national parks representing a critical threat to the nation's infrastructure. The decision to lay off park rangers, the decision to cut funding, this by the Trump administration, has proven to be disastrous. And those of us who follow what is going on with the National Park Service understand that. But there is more. When Donald Trump withdrew from the Paris Accords for the second time, the question became, what are we facing in terms of environmental issues? And the fact is that the Trump administration, following the line of too many so-called conservatives, really are not in favor of understanding the existential crisis that we face in terms of our environment. There is no doubt that the weather is changing, and there is no doubt that all of us are being impacted. All you have to do is take a look at the weather map, not only in the United States, but around the world. What does it mean when the major and perhaps the only real superpower in the world steps back from leadership when it comes to environmental protection? And that, my friends, is another central issue which we face in a very difficult and complex world. I do want to also note the fact that America pulling back, meaning a return to a certain level of isolationism, should concern each and every one of us. You know that China is becoming more aggressive in its economic and political role in the world. And we know that as the United States steps back, that void needs to be filled, and it may well be filled by China. This is a real reason to examine our American foreign policy and where we are going with it. And of course, we face many more issues domestically, so many issues that it's hard to classify them all. But I do want to say a word about the performing arts. I want to say a word about the Kennedy Center. You know that Donald Trump changed the rules on how the naming would take place. Trustees of the Kennedy Center, only those appointed by Trump, are allowed to vote. New change in the rules. And of course, now it's the Trump Kennedy Center. And we have seen artists, major artists, decide to boycott the Kennedy Center, even this New Year's Eve, when a jazz great is saying, "I'm not going to perform." We are seeing a shift, a change that frankly disturbs me greatly. And that applies to colleges and universities around the country. We are seeing the Trump administration aggressively trying to intrude and prevent certain things which we have undertaken and seen in college and university campuses over the years. Research grants are being denied. One good friend of mine, who I know is listening to this podcast, knows that his daughter, who received her PhD from MIT and who had grants lined up to continue to do the great public work that she wants to do, those grants have been canceled. And we are seeing this uniformly in our government. We are seeing cutbacks in vital areas, something which should concern every one of us. Now the question becomes, now that I've given you a view of the world, and I will admit, not a particularly optimistic view of the world, what are my views about 2026? I always am an optimist. I always believe that things can only get better. I believe with all my heart that the United States of America will grow and prosper. How we grow and prosper, the direction we go in, is dependent on the vote of the people in 2026. This next year will be a dynamic year of politics. Much will be determined by how we vote. And yes, indeed, whether or not the Supreme Court is listening to the will of the people. There needs to be a revolution in the Republican Party, and I believe with perfect faith that there will be. We are already seeing people in the party who are denying Trump's authority, who are moving away from Donald Trump's vision of the world. That is a good thing. Of course, in the year 2026, the Democrats are going to have to define themselves. Who will their leadership be? Who will speak for the Democratic Party? What kind of an agenda will the Democrats put forth for the American people in 2026? We are a two-party system, and therefore the functioning of both parties is essential. Now, I've tried in this last podcast before the new year to give you a view backward and perhaps even a little bit forward. I want to end on an optimistic note. I do believe that the future will be secure. I do believe that many of the things which have disturbed us in this year will pass. And then the challenge will be preserving, protecting, and improving the nation in which we live. That, my friends, is critical. Whether it is foreign policy, domestic policy, health policy, social security, whether it has to do with our economy and, frankly, what happens with the arts. All of these questions hang, and we are going to talk about them in 2026. This podcast, Around the Political World with John Rothman, has gained great traction. I think it has to do with the fact that we need a forum in which opinions are expressed and in which real debate can take place. That is my intention. Please do support Around the Political World with John Rothman. Tell your friends, your family. Send copies of this to those who you think would benefit from it. And I want to thank you for tuning in to another episode of Around the Political World with John Rothman. I want to thank you for sticking with us in 2025. I promise you I will continue in 2026 to do the very best that I can. Of course, I'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode. You can write me a review on Apple Podcasts, drop a comment on YouTube or Spotify, and click any of the links, the show notes, to connect with me on social media. Remember, please, to share an episode with a friend or colleague so we can continue to grow and expand. That's what we want to do in 2026. And of course, the show has been getting so much positive attention that we were excited that we were able this year to bring on advertising support. And we're so happy that we are able to do that. It's been a successful year from that point of view, but a lot more work needs to be done. And of course, to Gogo Zoger, the wonderful producer of this podcast, I want to say a special thank you. She keeps this program up and running, and she does a great job. So to all of you, a happy, healthy new year. 2026 is almost here. I'll be taking tomorrow off, New Year's Day, and I'm sure many of you will be, doing the same thing. But I'll be back. I'll be back on Friday with another episode of Around the Political World with John Rothman in a new year. So a happy, healthy, productive year to all of us, and may things only get better. And I believe with your help, it will. No doubt about it. I am John Rothman. See you Friday, right here on Around the Political World with John Rothman.
Did you know Microsoft has officially ended support for Windows 10? Upgrade to Windows 11 with an LG Gram laptop. Voted PC Mag's Reader's Choice Top Laptop brand for 2025. Thin and ultra lightweight, the LG Gram keeps you productive anywhere. And Windows 11 gives you access to free security updates and ongoing feature upgrades. Visit lgusa.com/iHeart for great seasonal savings on LG Gram laptops with Windows 11. PC Mag Reader's Choice used with permission. All rights reserved.
Happy holidays! Want to give your host a gift? Consider subscribing, rating, and reviewing the show this holiday season. It really helps the show grow. From all of us at Believe, have a Merry Christmas, everyone, and a Happy Holiday. If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.